I say was just comment on what you brought up about like intent, right? So in talking about expressly, PayPal backed entities, since Mark spent a lot of time talking about PYUSD specifically, I think a really good example in terms of looking at intent is something like Kiva, which is this microfinance platform that framed itself as direct peer-to-peer lending or micro lending, and it turned out it wasn't actually directly peer-to-peer a few years after it launched. But the main people behind that are people like Piero Midyar, the eBay founder, who obviously has a lot of direct ties to PayPal since he has owned it since 2002. And then you had people like Reid Hoffman from the so-called PayPal Mafia on the board. You also had Wences Casares on the board for some time. I don't believe he's there anymore, but Reid Hoffman still is. And a lot of the other people, including the people that created Kiva, hail from PayPal, or they hail from eBay or the Omidyar network, or, but essentially we're in the eBay PayPal family here when we're talking about Kiva. And Kiva framed itself for a long time when it first launched as banking the unbanked or banking the unbankable, which is similar to the talking points that have been used with stable coins, right? So as time has gone on, what happened is that people in these areas that were being banked by Kiva or being receiving these loans through Kiva over time became more dependent on that service. And they also, gained trust among this particular base. And then Kiva launched something called the Kiva Protocol, and then teamed up with the UN to go in these countries where they had become a major part of the economy for the so-called unbankable. And they have now imposed a digital ID on these countries. In places like, I believe, Sierra Leone, as an example, but they're doing it across the board in direct coordination with the UN, of course, part of the whole digital ID agenda backed by the UN-sponsored public-private partnership ID 2020, brought to you by Bill Gates and the Rockefellers and all of these guys. Right. So, and the framing of it is, it's not just going to be, your government ID. It's going to be your key to banking, and it's going to have your credit history, and it's also going to have all your health data and all of this stuff. I mean, basically an exact replica of, what the World Economic Forum and UN plans for digital ID are. On these people, and the so-called unbanked or the unbankable are often voiceless people, vulnerable people, and people that don't really know that these particular agendas are rolling out on the global level. So and I think also when you look at sort of this particular network as it relates to PayPal, which we do in our most recent piece, Chain of Custody, looking at how they frame, either their philanthropy or their sponsorship of entrepreneurs in places like Latin America and Africa. It's framed under altruistic terms, but when you actually look and what these people's motives are for doing it, something else definitely emerges. And I think that's particularly true if you look at someone either like Piero Midyar or someone like Reid Hoffman, who spent a lot of his, in Hoffman's case, a lot of his quote unquote philanthropy has been, for fighting like shadow wars and political campaigns and creating, false flags that didn't happen and all of this weird stuff that he funded through these shadow groups called Acronym and all of this stuff. And a lot of it just, as we discuss in the article, turns out to be influence peddling. For this particular group, that isn't to say that every stablecoin that says banking the unbanked is just like these guys, sure. But this particular network that we're talking about here, whether eBay, PayPal, that particular crowd, and obviously the same crowd that's behind PYUSD, this is the kind of stuff they've done before when they've used a lot of these same talking points, I guess. And considering that you have people like Wences Casares involved, who, also is, or at least he was involved and then went on to Xapo and all of that, and this idea that Xapo was going to be the bridge between stable coins, the dollar and Bitcoin, and bring it all together.
Do you still have your Bitcoin on an exchange? Don't hold your Bitcoin on an exchange. Take it into self-custody. If you're looking for an easy way to do that, we have the Bitkey. Bitkey is Bitcoin made easy to use and hard to lose. Take the first step. Get your Bitcoin off the exchange. Check out the link in the show notes. That'll get you 20% off your Bitkey, or use the code TFTC20 at checkout.
And his past ties to PayPal and also to Facebook's DM project, their attempt at a stable coin, I guess. I find that a little bit concerning.
Definitely.
I do as well. And the
And that's another thing. I think we talked about this last time you guys were on too, like narrative crafting and manufactured consent. And that's one thing uh, I've been trying to, again, like similar to what I did with ESG 5 years ago. It's happening this cycle now. Bitcoin doesn't compete with the dollar. It's like not money. It's a commodity. It's real estate, it's
Right.
property, whatever you want to call it. It's like, no, Bitcoin is money. It is competing with the dollar. And every other currency for that matter, whether they be fiat currencies or cryptocurrencies. And we need to own that and get ahead of that, because that's from a framing perspective within the Bitcoin industry. I think that is something that could really trip us up in the future if we go along with Bitcoin's just property. It's this commodity. It doesn't compete with the dollar. And then lo and behold, Bitcoin price goes up. It becomes easier to spend it. More people want to receive it. It is obviously competing with the dollar as a monetary asset. The government's like, well, you guys told us it wasn't competing with the dollar, so we have to like come in and down with the hammer. Like we should just own it from the beginning. Be like, no, this is competing with the dollar. We don't like the dollar system. We think it's inherently corrupt. And this monetary system is much more open, transparent, and morally aligned with the future that people want to see.
But Michael Saylor says that we shouldn't fight the dollar and we should, for 100%. I think you are seeing, narrative carving or whatever the phrase was that you used that was better than the word I just said. But you are seeing it in the Bitcoin space. And you're seeing huge people come in like a Larry Fink, pushing Bitcoin as digital gold or in this way that's not really this peer-to-peer currency. And I'm not trying to go total Roger Ver hijacking Bitcoin thing or Bcash. I think Bcash is a bad idea because of the centralizing effects of big blocks. But this idea that, hey, well, our bags are going to go up, so we should just sit back and be passive because we're rich now, is super fucking lame. That's not why we're here. I think we are here to have a state change of money and take the power back from the debt pardoning levers of the state via the central bank and via this Ponzi scheme that is the treasury market. We're here to defang that because it's an extremely powerful political tool that they use to wage war on the world with the treasury market. So let's not let Bitcoin become a ledger where we store dollars and store treasuries and tokenize debt because that's what they want to do. And they're not just going to tokenize debt or dollars. They're going to tokenize pretty much everything. They're going to